Welcome back, everybody. Once again, I'm Stephen Colbert, and I'm joined by the four hobbits from the Lord of the Rings saga that you just saw go through a lot of stuff. Let's give a round of applause, please, for Billy Boyd, Dominic Monaghan, Sean Astin, and Elijah Wood. Hey, you guys.
Hello.
Thanks so much for being here. I know this. I think I am just as excited to talk to you as the audience is to see you talk right now. Elijah, thanks so much for reaching out to me and putting this thing together. This is really exciting. I can't wait to talk to you and the other actors and creators after the next two movies. Sean, good to see you again. My wife and I have known you for a few years now. Billy and Dom, I'm most excited to see you. You complete my collection. I have yet to ever speak to you guys. It's a long time coming. I'm super excited you're here. I want to get a question. This is a jump ball question for any of you. As we look back on the film 20 years later, how meaningful it is to audiences, how beautiful it continues to be as a work of art, as a story, as a technical achievement, the way it's changed the way films are made, and also what the audience's expectation of what is achievable in a film, especially adaptation of literature. What did you think this was going to be going into it?
I remember saying to Elijah in the we met right across from the Maison Sofitel Hotel, or in that hotel.
That's right. In the lobby.
I
had just been upstairs getting my wig fit, and you were going to get yours, and we passed each other.
Yeah, and I was like, "Are you ready for this?" And you go. Elijah goes, "I'm ready." And then we get down there and I'm like, "I'm not ready."
Interesting anecdote about that meeting too. I was 18 at the time. Sean, you were 28. We both just turned 40 and 50 respectively. Wow. How about them apples? But in answer to your question, I mean, I think what were our expectations? There was no way for us to anticipate what those films would become. I think we all just knew that we were about to embark on something significant. So meeting Sean in that lobby and him asking me that question, "Are you ready?" There was gravity to that. There was weight to that, an understanding of there being something percolating that was bigger than all of us, that we were about to be a part of. But in terms of where that would go and what that would be and what was around the next bend as far as the beginning of that adventure, we didn't know. And we'd never been to New Zealand. And I think we were all familiar with Peter Jackson's work. So from my perspective, I was like, this is Peter Jackson, who I love. I'd seen Heavenly Creatures, and I thought this is the perfect person to bring these books to life. And beyond that, didn't know what to expect.
I remember thinking in that moment, like, I'm 10 years older, and I'm supposed to have some sort of, like, I don't know, paternal role with Elijah. Like, I needed to adopt a posture of responsibility and caretaking. And, that was obliterated, like, within the first week being down there. I'm like, "Elijah, help me."
I landed with John Rhys Davies, who plays Gimli, obviously, fantastically. And we were kind of shuttled over to Stone Street the day that we landed to say hello to Pete. Ridiculously jet lagged. I'd never had that type of jet lag before. The furthest I'd ever been at that point was probably Tunisia or somewhere like that. So to be on a flight for, 28 hours or something, I was just out of my mind. And Peter said to John and I, "Would you like to see Bag End?" And I said, yeah, that sounds great. So we went into the set of Bag End with the tables and the maps and the scarves hung up on the wall. And I was, having a bit of an out of body experience. And as we were finished with that, he said to us, "Now do you want to see Gandalf's Bag End?" And I was so confused. I just kind of said, "Sounds great," and just followed on behind him. We then went into a perfectly miniaturized version of Bag End, so that obviously Ian McKellen looked a lot taller, with the same scarves and the same maps and the same fireplace in the same place.
Yeah.
I same as Sean. I just thought, I have no idea what I'm walking into here. It felt huge,
I remember I was sort of a working actor at the time, mainly in theatre. So traveling all over, doing tours, going to London, going to south of England, going, all over Scotland. And then this job came in, and it was travel to New Zealand. So it just kind of felt like another acting job somehow. But then on the plane, I remember it was my 31st birthday when I traveled to New Zealand, and Oрландо Bloom was on the plane, and he spotted me straight away and said, you look like a hobbit. And I was like, oh yeah, you must be Oрландо, you look like an elf. And we got on this plane for, 30 hours or however long it takes to get to New Zealand. And we sat and we were reading the book together, and we tried to memorize the One Ring poem on the way over. And when we got to Los Angeles, it was my birthday again because of the time difference. So we opened a bottle of champagne and we drank that. And I remember when we got to New Zealand, one of the producer's assistants gave me this parcel, and I opened it, and it was this beautifully bound leather cover on the script for the fellowship. And that's when I thought, oh, wait a minute, this is something different. They didn't just hand you a script. It was beautifully bound in leather, and it had my name on the bottom. And I just thought, oh, wait a minute, this is something kind of special here,
That's one of the things that from everything that I've read about the production of the film, is that the amount of care and detail that went into every aspect of it, that everyone working on it had a sense. At a certain point, they came to this realization, oh, I can add something very special to this very love made visible for the thing that you were trying to make together. What about your relationship with the source material? Did any of you have a particular relationship to the books before you went in?
When I was growing up, I grew up in a housing estate in Glasgow. So a sort of, real working class sort of upbringing. And me and all the boys that I hung with, all we did was play soccer. That was our, football. We just played football all the time. We'd hang out at night, just play football. And one of the boys, I remember Paul Hockey was his name. And he had this book, The Hobbit. And all of us were like, what? You got a book? You're bringing a book out? And he's like, I've started reading this book. It's incredible. And for some reason, it caught on. And we all got a copy of this book, The Hobbit. And we would read it, ourselves at home before bed. We'd make you have to read one chapter or you have to read 2 chapters. And the next day we would talk about this book, about these characters. And it never happened before and it never happened after. And why it happened, I have got no idea. But we grew up over this, couple of months, and we had this shared experience reading The Hobbit. It's weird, and it never happened again. And then I went on, as we all did, to read Lord of the Rings. But all of us agreed, well, this doesn't have Bilbo. This is Frodo. Who's this Frodo? We didn't want to read a story about this guy, and we never read it. And then when I left school, I became a bookbinder. I make books. That's what I trained to do. Really? And one of the books that I made was The Lord of the Rings.
Wow. What copy of The Lord of the Rings did you bind?
So I used to work for HarperCollins.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So I used to bind, it was the paperback. So we used to make the paperback, the 3-in-1.
He's looking to see if he's got it.
And we also did the separates.
Yeah.
Have you got it there?
I got a lot of different copies of The Lord of the Rings here, man. I might have it.
I used to read every book that we bound. And then hold on.
That version? That
could be one of the ones I did. If the cover's on all squinty, it's one of mine. But I used to read every book that we made, and I never read Lord of the Rings because I always felt it was too much to go into. And when I quit my job, I took the book, and that's when I first read it. I took that book with me.
I had just gotten through with my undergraduate degree at UCLA, and I had a double major, and it was history and American literature and culture. So I say that as a way of saying, like, I'm smart, I read stuff, but I'd never even heard of Lord of the Rings.
Wow.
So when I was told that Peter Jackson was adapting this like classic book, I raced to the bookstore. I got the 3-volume Alan Lee illustrated version, and I raced home. And unfortunately, I didn't read it. I wasn't reading it for enjoyment or pleasure.
Right.
I was like speed reading it to figure out what a Samwise Gamgee was.
Right.
And so as I was reading this Lord of the Rings, speed reading The Fellowship, and I started seeing that Samwise Gamgee was a gardener, I was like, that's me. That's absolutely me. Like I understand on a literary level and a like spiritual level and philosophical level, like how important it is to be a gardener. And so it's like that's the most noble character, a gardener. You know, I want to play a gardener. I know and I ended up somehow I watched the Ralph Bakshi version, and I was horrified to see how the hobbits were depicted in the Ralph Bakshi
Very
version.
roly-poly, yeah.
Oh, no. Oh, Mr. Frodo, I don't know what I'm feeling about life right now, you know. And I remember going to Peter and being like, do we have to do it like that? Like, I really don't. He said,
let's
no.
talk
I was
about-
like, woo.
Yeah.
I want to talk about like what was your first thing that you shot, and what was your favorite day of shooting?
It's the wooded road. So just leaving Farmer Maggot's field as we get bumped into by Merry and Pippin on our way out of the Shire. We roll down the hill. So it was us finishing that roll down the hill onto the wooded road, the looking around, get off the road, Frodo senses something's amiss.
Spielberg,
and then
the Spielberg Jaws shot of
Yeah.
the focus rack, and beautiful.
Can I just quickly say, but that first day really set something very important for me, which was after we rolled down the hill, I said to Peter, do you know what would be really great for Pippin would be if when we landed, we were really close to a big pile of horse. And if Pippin thought, oh, that was really lucky. You know, I just liked, it set him up straight away that he sees the positive in everything.
Yeah.
That we fall down a hill, but because we didn't land in the that's a good thing. And Pete said, great. And he got somebody from Weta, can you make some horse?
Right.
And I thought, wow, first day that this big director on this big film would listen to an actor to do a little sort of gag. I thought, oh, wow, that sets us up so well that, you know, this is obviously a director who listens to actors and loves to create. And, you know, because his first day with the Hobbits, you would think he would just say, no, we don't have time for that, you know? Mm-hmm. But his first thought was, yeah, who can make horse, you know?
And we were filming in, I think it's called Queen's Park. I'm not sure the exact name of it.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right.
And so we were on a public hiking trail. So here we are, this like $300 million movie with, you know, the greatest effects you'll ever see in movies and this incredible cast and all this stuff. And then there's like hikers walking by, excuse me, pardon me, excuse me. And we're like in our Hobbit stuff, like trying to hide.
Who has the spider crawl down them?
Me.
How did you like that?
I love spiders. I had a nature show for 3 years, and I keep spiders in my house. I have a black widow spider right now, 2 tarantulas. So I loved it. And when I spoke to the spider wrangler afterwards, when we were done with the scene, he said, "Oh, that's great. That's fantastic because they do bite." And I said, "Oh, they do bite. You didn't feel like telling me that just before we did the scene, but we got it. It was great."
Okay, how about your favorite day to shoot?
the first time I really felt while filming this thing, it was the first time we took helicopters. It was in the South Island, kind of near Christchurch, I think, I can't remember the name of the mountain range, but we met at this farmhouse place down below, and 4 a.m, we're all getting our ears and hair and feet on and waiting, and then the helicopters were later than they thought they would be coming in. And then we all, got on these helicopters and went to the top of the mountain to shoot the post Khazad-dûm Gandalf falling down scene, where we come running out of the hills and we're now on the top of this mountain, and we're all heartbroken, and the hobbits are all crying, and it was like, when we ultimately saw that, it was Peter's birthday, and his house. We went up to his house down in Queenstown, and they showed the sequence, and all of a sudden it was like, okay, we're like a team. This is epic. Not on a, like, this is a great movie. This is the kind of movie like Lawrence of Arabia or something, where you're going to want to sit and just like.
And do you, not wanting to ruin the gravitas of what Sean Astin just said there, because that was beautiful, Sean, but do you remember that John Rhys Davies had a Lazy Boy Barker lounger in his contract? So when we were on the helicopter going up and got dropped off, at one point, a separate helicopter flew up a Lazy Boy Barker lounger for John Rhys Davies to sit on. Oh my goodness, that was hilarious.
That is a good agent. I want the name of his agent. Brilliant. How about you, Elijah?
The first thing that came to my mind was the rare occasion where the Fellowship was all together. So the first thing that came to mind was actually the cave troll sequence, because that was very fun to shoot. And we were it was wild technically at the time, because a lot of CG prior to that were on lock-off cameras. What was very unique about that particular sequence was that it was handheld. And so it was this very loose experience for everybody. And the fact that you were able to shoot handheld and insert a CG creature was sort of a revolutionary thing. That was really fun to shoot. But yeah, the flying in a helicopter onto a mountaintop. And the thing about that too was that we were actually grounded for 3 days. And I'd never been in a helicopter. I don't think any of us had ever been in a helicopter before. So we were super excited. Well, Sean had, of course. So we were super excited about that. But then we were stuck, and we would just hang out, biding our time. I remember that very fondly. Yeah. A lot of our memories, I think, in addition to them being about the sort of majesty of the shooting and the locations that we'd go to, it was also about the mundane, us sitting around. I think, we had a paper cup that we were tossing around at that location just because we had nothing to do. And those, the way that we would interact and sort of kill our time as friends was a huge part of that experience. And that really stands out in my mind as well.
I'm curious what your first experience was of actually seeing the film as an audience member.
I saw it at I think it was called the Adikoff Screening Room across from William Morris in Beverly Hills. Like the least romantic, the least
least Middle Earth any place on Earth gets.
It's funny that Sean was just talking about the moment where we kind of almost explode out of Khazad-dûm and we're all completely overwhelmed with emotion. That's kind of how I felt after I came out of Fellowship for the first time. We're in a darkened room, the credits rolled, total silence. You could see that Pete and Fran were obviously nervous and apprehensive to hear what we thought. We busted out into the daylight because we must have watched the screening at like 11 in the morning or something. And I just came out into this broad daylight, just completely flummoxed and bamboozled by what I saw. And then I think Elijah and I stood around and probably smoked 15 cigarettes in 8 minutes, and because I don't even smoke cigarettes. I was just like, can I have one of those cigarettes? Can I have one of those cigarettes? It's just very confusing,
It was overwhelming. I agree. I had the exact same feeling. It's really difficult to process when you work on something for so long, especially something like this that a large degree of it is comes to life in post. So there was things we were seeing for the first time that weren't there on the day. And, you have so many expectations of what that's going to be that it can't not be overwhelming. So it was just hard to process. I don't think I was able to really I couldn't digest it until the second time, I think.
We had all seen a great 30-minute presentation collection of scenes at the Cannes Film Festival, like 7 months earlier.
Yeah.
They were brilliant the way they managed the relationship of the movie to the public and to the media and stuff. And they put on this incredible party in the Cannes Film Festival up at this castle. And you definitely, when you saw that footage, you were like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. When I saw The Fellowship for the first time in its entirety, what would become a recurring theme for Shawnee Boy was I was totally unprepared emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. I was confused. I was frustrated. I didn't know what I was like. It was just tilt. I just couldn't handle it. Just didn't know what to do.
Well, we as an audience are certainly in the books and to a large degree in the movie, we're experiencing it through the Hobbit's experience. Like you know, Aragorn and Gandalf and Galadriel, everybody else they're too grand for a human to actually hook up their jumper cables to and go, okay, I am that person. But the Hobbits, you're just us. You're just folk, you know? Who else would you like to have played? What other characters would you like to have played in The Lord of the Rings other than yourself? It's like, oh, I would like to have been, doesn't even have to be a major player. There's some other part you would like to have done in it.
So I was talking about how much I resonated with, how much the gardener motif resonated with me as I read the books the first time, and I felt so connected to it. But I also was, I don't know, like the way the agent and Victoria Burrows, the casting director, were talking to me. All of a sudden, I just got this sense, like, wait a minute, are you like pigeonholing me? Are you like, is this like typecasting? Like, who else could I be? Because this Aragorn guy looks like really cool. He's like got a sword and, you know, like, could I play Aragorn? And I remember them going, no, you can play Aragorn.
I mean, there's so many great characters in Tolkien, huh? I mean, the difficult thing about Peter's movies is, you know, everyone sort of nailed it. You know, the idea of playing Gollum feels amazing, but how can you after you've seen Andy's, you know? It's just so perfect. It's now in my mind that it's hard to think of playing anyone else. So it need to be like Tom Bombadil. I'd like to have a go at that character.
Much maligned, and I think unfairly, Tom Bombadil. I understand why he's not in the movie, but I'm a Bombadil fan. There's some good stuff in there. Fan. Who are you, master, says Frodo. And Tom says back, who are you? Who are you? Yourself, alone and nameless. And that goes right down my spine when I read that every time. Who are you? Yourself, alone and nameless. Which is, Tom asks this elemental question.
Wow.
Yeah. Just this old being who kind of understands it. It's just beautiful, you know. And I totally understand why he's not in the movie.
Me too, yeah.
Such a beautiful character.
I'll push back on you, Stephen, a little bit there because, like, I love reading aloud. And my daughter Allie was 2 years old, 3 years old, and I would read, you know, Dr. Seuss to her and stuff. And I'd love to, you know, whenever there are poems or songs in children's books, I can sing them. I died on the doorstep of Tom Bombadil's poems and songs. I just couldn't do them. I don't know how to do them.
You can't sell the "Hey, come, merry doll, dairy doll, my darlings." You can't. bright blue's jacket is and his boots are yellow. You couldn't sell it. I thought you were an actor, man.
Come on.
Okay, how about this? You can't play. You don't want to play another. I can understand that, Billy. Like everything is sort of like perfect, like that. What's your favorite character then? Like who do you love most in
I would probably echo what Sean said about Aragorn. I mean, we, you know, in so many ways, in that egoic, you know, little piece of us, we all want to be the guy carrying the sword and saving the day. I mean, Viggo is such an incredible human being, and we all love him so much. There's a couple of nice, yeah, pull it out.
Oh, that's
you.
There's a couple of moments, one moment in The Fellowship and one moment, I think, in Two Towers, where it's just, as a movie nerd, it's those moments where you just think, what is happening there? What has he been able to do? When Aragorn says to Frodo, you know, at the top of Amon Hen, run, you go and I'm going to cause a distraction and keep you safe. And as the Urukai come towards him slow-mo, it wasn't something I don't think that's in the script. Viggo takes his sword and he puts it to his forehead and he just gently closes his eyes for a second. And it seems in me as a fan, he's saying, I might die here and I'm going to say a little prayer to know that that's okay. That sends shivers down my spine. And then I think a lot of people talk about the moment in, I think, Two Towers, where he's almost died and his horse takes him back and he opens those massive double doors in slow motion and his hair's all wet. He's got blood all over his face. Now, I'm a relatively heterosexual man, but I caught some feelings at that point. I definitely.
How could you not?
Yeah, get in line.
I would say Treebeard, it was my favorite. I love the idea, the kind of environmentalism message that Tolkien was going for, the kind of anti-industrial thing, and the idea that nature can come back, can animate to defend itself. And my father, John, asked, I don't know if you ever met my dad, Stephen Gomez from the original Addams Family. He's 91 now. I'm sure he's thrilled for me to mention. And he talks like an ant. He thinks and talks like an ant. Everything is so slow and so like cumbersome. There's great wisdom in what he's saying, but it takes forever. And as kids, we would just rather jump out of a window than suffer through it anymore. But when you did, you came away from it, never, those thoughts, those ideas are with you for the rest of your life. So I would say Treebeard for me.
Gollum for me, the tragedy of Gollum, starting with Riddles in the Dark, that character captured my imagination. I think I read The Hobbit when I was 9 or 10, maybe 11. And that particular character, and then ultimately what you learn about him throughout Lord of the Rings, and the duality of that character, the tragedy of that character, the corruption of the ring as sort of, an indication of what could potentially happen to Frodo or anyone else who holds the ring. It's an incredible character that I always loved when I was young. So, and then seeing it come to life, by way of what Andy brought to it is just extraordinary.
We have time for just a couple more things. So, I know this is so fun. The one is, let's talk about the character that is everywhere at all times, and that's New Zealand itself. This natural backdrop. Tolkien said, if you want to know what Middle Earth is, it is my reaction, my gratitude for the beauty of the world as it is. Like that Middle Earth is his expression of what he sees as the beauty and the gift of creation itself. That's what New Zealand's like everywhere you go, is the crazy thing. Is that every time, the feeling I had the first time I had a chance to go down there was every corner you turn around, you see a new vista and you go, oh, the world just began right there. That just came out of the sea. And geologically speaking, it sort of did. It's very young. But not only the place, but the people. What role did New Zealand itself play in the movie for you? And what was your reaction to first being there for the first time?
There was some phone interview I got to do during that time. And I said, it's as though Tolkien walked across New Zealand and then sat down and wrote this book. And they put that as the slug line in the newspaper. And I was like, woo! I nailed it. Great quote, John.
You cannot overemphasize the importance of that country in the making of the films, both in terms of our relationship to it and the indelible mark that it left in our lives, and in our hearts, like it'll be with us forever. But it's also the people, and it's the people that made this film. And it was a community of folks that only could have been them in a way. I truly have not worked with a more able and there's an attitude in New Zealand amongst film crews that's so specific to New Zealand, which is this thing of, it doesn't matter what your station is, you'll just put on the hat and go do the thing because it's required of you and because you believe in it and because we're all in this thing together. And it was such a beautiful experience in that regard. One of the runners that would pick us up in the morning, Zoe, was also a stand-in, would do anything, and everybody would sort of do anything. And that is sort of, if there's a sort of unspoken hero of the movie, or of the movies. It's all of those people banding together in a way that pushed all of us forward and made it possible. And that is very unique to that country.
An extension of that as well, if you remember, on our, must have been the first week, Pete brought in a priest or a speaker from the Maori people who blessed the production and blessed everyone involved. And I remember really vividly him saying, you know, we wish you all the best with this and we hope great success. And he said, but remember, when the film is done and you're all gone, this land will still be here. So treat the land well. And I remember that really stuck in my head, you know. And
me too. He said that it was here long before you, and it'll be here long after you're gone. So you must be a steward of the land, that kind of thing.
And there was something so Tolkien about that moment, even though it was the Maori people saying what they were saying, and it just made you think of the humanity of all of that and the humanity of this story. There's something very special about that, and that went through the whole making of the movies.
Well, that leads me to my last question, which it's about the humanity of the films, because as I said before, the hobbits really are the humans. Even like the Gondorians, you know, who are essentially Numenorians, are too grand for us. They're actually like literally like Aragorn's supposed to be like 7 feet tall or something. Like he's like they're better than we are. He's like this Apollonian ideal of a man. And of course, Gandalf is immortal, and so are the elves. You are the ones that we associate with. And one of the most beautiful aspects of the film to me is, and the four men I'm looking at right now express so beautifully in their performances, is it's about your love for each other. You love each other deeply and truly, of warts and all, maybe especially because of each other's warts, thinking of the amount of ways that Merry and Pippin pick on each other. But I think that's one of the reasons why this story is not relegated to like, well, it's a fantasy story, is that it's a true human story. And I wanted to just end here with you guys talking a little bit about the relationships between these two characters and what you think, what that means to you and what you think that means to the audience, because ultimately this is a love story to me.
Well, I mean, I'll talk very briefly about just our personal relationships. I mean, I've never worked on a film before or since that certainly had such an extended period of time with the same people, but something magical happened, and we've quizzed Peter Jackson and Philippa and Fran about it over the years in terms of the shrewdness of the casting. Because just think for a moment, if there were one member of the Fellowship who really was kind of unpleasant to work with and showed up late and was a drama queen and we didn't like them, it would have caused such an awful fracture throughout this jamboree of folks that went off on this adventure together. We shared, you know, not only crazy hours at work together. Hobbits would generally get picked up at 5:10 in the morning. We'd be the first in, the last out. We'd be driving home at 7:30 at night. On the way home, we'd say, should we grab a quick bite? You want to get dinner? So we'd have dinner that night until 9 or 10. And then very often I would stay at Elijah's place or stay at Billy's house if we're watching a late night movie. We learned to surf together. We bungee jumped together. We went through breakups with girlfriends together. We moved around the country together. I think Peter and his crew very much knew that if we get the right combination together, these guys are going to bond and want to keep each other safe off camera, and it's going to dictate so strongly on camera. When we were away from each other in The Two Towers and Return of the King, I felt those pangs of like, I've not seen Elijah or Sean forever, and they're going up Mount Doom, and I've not seen Billy, and he's in trouble on this battle plane, So it really became life imitating art. So that's what I'll say about that.
There's so many people who would come up to us during and after, and for 20 years now, say who are like, are you guys really that close in real life? What is that feeling like? We love each other. We love each other. We like, the only thing I can liken it to is what I hear veterans talk about who've been to war together. Mm-hmm. That there's like, it's sort of hard to describe to other people in a way that makes sense, because some of it is like the guys are saying, there's some mundane quality, but not when you accumulate it over time, and not when it's that intensity, and when the ideas are so reinforcing of those bonds, and the expectation is that you should be close. And it is real. I promise anyone who's curious or wondering, it's real. You know, you can have faith in something in the world, that the love that the people, that the hobbits have for each other is real love. It just is.
I love that notion too, that it is ultimately about love, Stephen, that you said. Like, what I think one of the most lovely aspects of the movie post it coming out and post our time in it is, by extension, it is a ripple of love. So often when we meet people who love the movies, fans, their collective experiences are all shared experiences of connection and love, which is such a beautiful thing, that this thing that we made, that we all got to be a part of and shared in our love of each other, that then was expressing the sort of inner love of the storytelling, is then by extension sort of this ripple effect of new people all the time discovering these characters and their own connection to it, and also their own connection to each other as a result, which I think is such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, what do we most want to be? Not alone. And there's this beautiful community of people who can love this film together. This film ultimately about love. Speaking about making it real, I will end on one last one. Some of these questions today have been from fans online in anticipation of this. And I'll end on this one. Billy, this one's for you. Talk about making things real. Oh, I'm sure you get asked about second breakfast all the time. Have you made that real in your life? Because I think it's an excellent idea.
It's such a huge thing from the movies. I probably get asked something about second breakfast probably every day. So, and I love it. It's such a wonderful, and if I can very quickly just tell you that scene, I was looking forward to that scene because it sort of sets the hobbits up, you know, and we worked hard as someone who loves the books as much as you do. You know how much you want it to work. You want Tolkien's world to work. And everybody felt like that. And I thought that stuff about, it's just so normal for the hobbits. Second breakfast, 11. Well, if we're going to go on this adventure, we have to get the rules. And and it started snowing that day when we were filming it. And Pete was like, we have to just shoot it anyway because we're off somewhere else the next day or whatever. And it felt so rushed, and I was so deflated. It was like one take, if you guys remember. We did one take, and then they had to get us out of there before, you know, they couldn't get the cars out, they couldn't get the planes out. And I was so disappointed. I was like, oh, I thought this was going to be close-ups and tons of coverage, and it just, and for some reason, it sticks in people's heads. And second breakfast is such a huge thing. And I do try and have second breakfast most days.
Well, Billy, I was on the west side of LA yesterday to do a COVID test for work. And I dropped in on Billy. Billy and his wife and his son have become kind of a bubble for me. And I finished off an apple in the car. And then you made us all coffee. So we kind of had second breakfast yesterday. I mean, come on.
Well, fellas, thank you so much. This has been such a treat for me, and I hope for the audience who's watching this right now. Elijah, again, thanks for reaching out about doing these after the films. It's been such a joy, not only to talk to you today, but obviously this is a chance for me to say thank you for the work that you did back then and the care and the love you gave to the story and made it not only beautiful and exciting and wonderful performances, but managed to give new life, new images to this world without replacing the ones in my head from a child when I read it. It's an addition, it's not a replacement. And that's an incredibly rare thing to achieve. So thank you for that. And I just want to say to everybody watching, that's a wrap on the first of our 3 conversations with the cast of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I want to thank Billy, Dom, Sean, and Elijah. Thank you to everyone watching from theaters all around the world. And importantly, everyone working at those theaters who are doing everything possible to give you a safe and comfortable experience. Please join me at the very same theater for The Two Towers and a conversation with Kate Blanchett, Orlando Bloom, Viggo Mortensen, and Liv Tyler, followed by The Return of the King with Andy Serkis, Ian McKellen, and Peter Jackson. What a treat, you guys.
Wonderful.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Welcome back. Once again, let's give a round of applause for our guests on tonight's panel, Cate Blanchett, Orlando Bloom, Liv Tyler, and Viggo Mortensen. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Now, as we look back at 20 years at these films that are recognized as masterpieces, critical and obviously commercial successes, they mean an enormous amount to the people who are the fans of these movies and the fans of the books who saw them executed so beautifully on film. I'm curious, what did you think you were getting into when you were first approached about doing this film? Cate, let's start with you. What did you imagine? What did you know, about these stories?
I just knew that I lost my sister for about 3 years to these novels, and they were really dangerous. So I actually hadn't gone down the rabbit hole, the Tolkien rabbit hole. I was terrified. And for me, it was working with the director of Brain Dead. And I thought that sensibility with these extraordinary books, I just wanted to be part of it. But I actually got career advice not to do it. Well, some of the worst career advice I ever got.
What was the rationale?
It's like, look, do you really want to go to New Zealand for 3 weeks and play an elf? I mean, who's going to see that? That was what I said, it's Peter Jackson. He made Brain Dead. I said, of course I'm going.
Liv, what did you know of the stories? And what was your expectation going in?
My mom was a huge fan, and I knew that it had been a big part of her life, but I had never read the books and wasn't particularly familiar with the world. I had a conversation with Peter Jackson where he asked me if I would join him in this thing. And it was more like 9 months or a year. It was a very long period of time. And that was weirdly the hardest decision because the talent behind it was just incredible. So I remember jumping on my bed. I was in a hotel room and it was just a dream, but it was, how can you commit that many months of your life to move to New Zealand? And that 9 months turned into actually like 3 years, but it was an amazing experience.
Orlando, what about you? What did you, now you famously basically emerged from your birth canal and got this job. So basically, you were 2 weeks out of acting school, yes?
Yeah, I actually got 2 days before I finished, I got news that I was cast and I couldn't believe it. I think I called my agent every day for a week, twice a day, and was like, "Are you sure it's me? They really want it?" You know, it was one of those. And I'd read the Hobbit as a kid. One of my best friends, who's Swedish, was a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, and I'd sort of, I'd embarked on Lord of the Rings, but I hadn't got the whole way through it. Not partly because I think I was probably ADD along with dyslexic, so it was. Just the focus and concentration to get there, but I sort of did a big deep dive into the world when, you know, the books and stuff when we arrived in New Zealand, and it was just like which was perfect timing actually, because it was so fresh in my mind. I remember I used to write I'd write faxes to Peter and Fran about could Legolas do what he does in the book and come to the Council of Elrond with this news, and they'd write me back a fax saying no, because we're doing it like this.
Well, Viggo, I know for a fact that one of the reasons why you were cast, besides your enormous talent, is how tiny your shorts were in G.I. Jane, because Fran and Philippa told me that those shorts played a big part in him getting cast in G.I. Jane.
Oh, you always get new information. I had no idea. My son, who was 11 at the time, had a lot to do with it. I got the phone call and it was quite late. Everybody was already in New Zealand, and it was sort of a last minute bit of casting. And I had not read these books. I had no idea. And I was on the phone kind of saying, I don't know. I think it's not a good idea. I won't be prepared. I won't contribute the way I should. Maybe you should find someone who really knows these books. And I don't know. And then I hung up the phone, and my son, Henry, said, what are you talking about? Are you talking about the Lord of the Rings? And then he said, he knew all about it. And he said, well, you have to do that. And what character is it? I said, it's this guy. He's in the woods.
He's in the woods.
Long legs, something, I don't know what. He goes, that's the king. I go, what do you mean it's the king? He said, then he's the king. You got to read the book, Dad. Let's go do it. I'll be gone a long time. Well, that's all right. You got to do it, you know. So that he had a lot.
Did any of you actually have any familiarity with New Zealand? I know, Kate, you're from Australia, but had you spent much time over in New Zealand?
No, and I'd never been to the South Island. So, but it's also, this is the thing is I mean, it's, if one believes in God, he was born in New Zealand. And it was, and you could, I mean, this is the thing, you couldn't have filmed it anywhere else. Because I think everyone thought, why are they filming it there? We sort of forget it was an undiscovered cinematic gem, really, before. And he and Fran and Philip have been making films there for years, but but New Zealand itself, that volcanic rock it's such a huge character. It is Middle Earth now.
I've been lucky enough to go a few times, and the feeling I have, especially on the South Island, is every vista you come across, every turn of every road you go, well, the world just began right there.
Yeah.
Like this is the world, like this is, I must stay here to be fully human because this is the world unspoiled right here. What about the rest of you? Did you have any experience with New Zealand? And if not, like, what was your impression of that place as a character in this film?
It was, you know, it wasn't on just that it was virgin territory in terms of movies, you know, landscapes, which was great, and that there was such variety to the landscape, but it was also the people. And many of them, I'd venture to say more than half of them, had little or no experience when we started. So it was a never to be repeated experience, not just showing these wonderful places that were so perfect for our story, but it was the way that it was made, this collective effort, well, we'll figure it out. I mean, it's never been done. Well, let's figure this out. Well, it was constantly that way. Every day, the way Peter Jackson and his team, they would find solutions, big ones, small ones, and invent ways of getting shots that nobody had done. It was that was amazing, and that was, it couldn't have been done the way it was done anywhere else because of the landscapes, but I think more importantly, the people.
Just wanted to follow on about the people, as Viggo said, because it was almost a spiritual experience. We would arrive at certain locations and we would bless the land. The land would be blessed. And it was a sort of embarking on this journey. You know, we'd be in helicopters. I mean, we'd take a helicopter to work at times, which was just mind blowing. You know, it's like, you know, we'd be down in, getting up at 6 a.m. and jumping in a helicopter to go to a part of this island that people would never set foot on before, you know, and everything was carpeted and taken care of. And it was pretty there was a sort of spiritual aspect that was pretty special to it too. I mean, with the huckers as well and the headbutts.
I know that Sean Bean famously didn't like the helicopters. Was everyone else okay with the helicopters?
I had the most insane helicopter ride with Sean Bean, but it's a story for another day. It's too long.
There was a moment where we were shooting all of these different units, multiple units, and Peter was kind of conducting this giant orchestra from his armchair, and all these he would be in all these magic, like we'd each be in a different magical place, having our own unique experience, maybe on the same day, which was really wild. Just the variety of the landscapes and the passion, enthusiasm of the people, and it was really very special.
There's something unique about this group. The four of you here after the Two Towers, these are the four people who had to learn Elvish. Because we got 3 elves and a guy who was raised by elves. What was that process like? When you looked at the lines and you, for the first time, when you saw Elvish written under your character's name, what was your reaction like? What was your reaction as an actor? Like, I have to say this?
Andrew Jack, who we've lost, I can't imagine making these films without him, you know, inventing a language or giving, you know, breathing life back into this extraordinary language. The way he spoke it, I just thought, oh, I want to live in that country. It's actually, Elvish is really beautiful. Liv had told me how difficult it was, but when you speak at Liv, it's like, you know,
honey.
So beautiful. It is like honey.
Liv, do you still have any Elvish in your head? Do you still have any Elvish in your head?
All my lines, they're sort of implanted there, but it was so fun because the way they would work with all of us, the dialect coaches, because we were all doing English accents as well as the different languages that we had to speak for the different characters. So they had broken it down and would teach, and they would give it to us on a cassette tape. I'm sure it was a cassette tape.
It was a cassette tape.
Yeah.
Sound, and we'd memorize it, and then they'd write it out so we could sort of see it. And it was just this repetitive memorization. And yeah, and then Viggo and I would have scenes where we were completely speaking in Elvish, which was so fun.
There was one guy in particular, and I think he was sort of a hermit, lived somewhere in California. We'd call him at all hours of day and night while we were shooting, because, you know, Southern California, 19 hours ahead or something, right? And every once in a while, you know, Peter or somebody would have a question, or one of us would say, well, means this, but if you want to add one more word, or would it change the meaning if you also said this line in Elvish? Well, how do you say that in Elvish? I'm not sure. And Andrew Jack would say, I think it's this, but let's call the hermit. And we would wake this guy up. And we would ask him, and he would pronounce it over the phone, and we'd be like, yeah, say it again. Say it again. And I would say it out loud, and then Andrew would say it. And, you know, it was kind of crazy, the whole, you know, somebody said it was like a big student film, right? Or something.
It was taken like very, very seriously, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was taken very, very seriously. I think there was more than one person. There were two people that we had to run these lines by, and we wouldn't roll camera on our Elvish dialogue unless it was correct. And Peter had, so that's, you know, in itself, when you think of that today, it's like people will be like, well, who knows anyway? You know what I mean? There's this one hermit somewhere in the world who's going to be able to.
Was that you, Stephen? Were they calling you?
No, I would think,
Yeah, exactly.
I would care. I would
You
care.
would have known. You would have known.
Well, what about the ears? Three of you had to do the ears. You will agree it's a fantastic look, right?
It's an amazing look, but they're right. I mean, because they're right next to your face, so next to any close-up or anything, the amount of time. I mean, obviously there are people who are having way more, like even John Rhys Davies, as the dwarf would have such a long time in the makeup chair because there was a whole mask situation. But just because the ears were so close to your face, and that was for a close-up, the detail and the time that it took to melt away the prosthetic so that it was a perfect blend. And I can countless times think of the times that Noreen, who was my amazing first Australian makeup, would like just rip them off the ears and go, no, I got the thing wrong, and it would throw it to the wall and it would stick there because she hadn't got it right, and then go back and do it again to make sure they were right. But they were a cool look.
But I collected all those cast-offs. I got really obsessed with them. And you'd find them at the end of the day. It was kind of gross, but I was fascinated by it. There'd be this pile of ear tips at the end, and I just kind of, you know. So when I finished, they gave me, I thought, oh, sweet, they bought me a box of chocolates. And I opened the lid, and they'd put all of the ear tips, they'd taken all the chocolates out, eaten them, and they put all of the ear tips in things and sprayed them. No. Yeah, I didn't eat them, but I have still them somewhere.
That was something that evolved, like the Hobbit feet. I mean, that was also a work in progress, you know, and like Gollum and all those things. But the elven, you know, ears, they got better and better, not only at applying them, but at the look of them. They were just fine tuning. They kept making over the whole process of shooting the trilogy.
I remember they made all these molds of our whole face because of all the other elements of size and everything, but they had an actual little ear, like a little porcelain ear, and that's where they would mold it. And I once thought, because where the studio was very close to where we all lived in Seatoon, and one day I had a few hours off and I convinced them to let me go home, and I then didn't have to go back. And so I was driving around in my car and I tried to take my own ears off, which was a strange thing because there was a lot of glue involved in, but I left it on the dash of the car, and then it sort of melted into the car over the next few days because they would just disintegrate. They were just glycerin, I guess. And
yeah,
delicious.
I love my favorite thing about them was that they designed them in such a way that light would pass through them,
yes,
like the edge of a natural ear. That one truly just sold it. What is your favorite scene that you're in, but then what was your favorite scene to shoot? I think those are two slightly different things. What was your favorite day of shooting? Let's start with that. What was your favorite day of shooting?
You know, I really loved all the things we did on the sets of Rivendell and Lothlorien. They were so beautifully designed. It was, again, based on those drawings by Ellen Lee and John Howe. And it was just being there, and they had the real waterfalls, and it was just a complete world. The set for Lothlorien was unbelievable. I mean, what you see and hear and feel watching in the movie was how it felt actually doing that, you know, where she appears to us coming down these stairs, and that was incredible. There was a scene actually that was not in the movies that Liv and I shot that also takes place in Lothlorien on this this mound that has all these flowers called Karen Amroth, where they have these sort of yellow flowers and these white flowers.
The Eleanor flower, the flowers.
Eleanor flower, yeah, beautiful. And that's where Arwen and Aragorn become betrothed, you know. And do you remember that, Liv? We shot this scene, and it was just before one of our breaks. So I shaved, and they tried to make me, you know, they did what they could, tried to make me look much younger than I was, and had sort of longer hair, and I was dressed as an elf, and it was like this beautiful shot.
You were dressed as an elf?
Completely, yeah. You remember? I didn't have the pointy ears, but I had the outfit completely, and with braided hair and all kinds of stuff.
I think you put a flower in between your toes.
Oh yeah, I was barefoot, and I picked one of the Eleanor flowers with my foot, and I offered it to her.
Now we know why it was cut.
By the way, this is a man who would walk around. This is a man who would walk around barefoot the whole time, all through, because Kiwis famously walk barefoot, so his toes could not have been that pretty. He had the gnarliest looking toes. They were like, I'd be in a bar with Viggo, and it'd be broken glass, and he was like dancing around barefoot. I'd be like, bro, really?
Legolas does a lot of amazing things. Do you have a favorite of those extraordinary things that Legolas does? Because there's a list of like, oh, okay, that's what elves can do that humans can't do. Do you have a favorite one? Shield surfing.
The shield surfing was really cool. Shield surfing was really cool. I did a reshoot for the Oliphant moment, where, you know, I'm climbing up the back, and there was this. I was on a stage. So this was the magic of Pete as well. And as an actor, you'd then go and see the movies and just have your mind blown by what he had created. But, you know, I remembered there was like a giant blue stack of sandbags painted blue, and so I was climbing up these, and it was like a skate park. He had like this slide, but like on a skateboard, so I had to sort of go down. For that was the trunk. There were all these really ingenious contraptions.
You physically did that? That's not just CGI.
There was a
going
slide.
Down something?
Exactly. There was a sort of, it wasn't as steep as that, but in order to get the motion and the movement, I was on these like skateboard style thing, and I was like, so I'm doing all of these, and I just had no idea how that would come together. And then it was like, and at the end of it, he said, now I want you to do this thing where when you get off, you have to kind of go, well, that was easy. And it was so out of character for Legolas. It was like it blew my little elven brain, because it was like, I was like, but like Legolas is just supposed to be like, you know, I'm not supposed to emote anything that feels like a human thing, right? In some ways, in my, you know, it's how I held onto it. And it was like, so, and when I saw it in the movie, I just it got like, I think it was a cool moment. And I was amused at myself and blown away at how Pete had managed to put it all together. Like,
I'd like to tell you my favorite moments with each of your characters and ask you about those moments and creating them. So Liv, is the moment you're at the Bruin Inn and you're the Nazgul across the river. My favorite moment is that moment of fear that you have. Like, what will I do now? Because I'm trapped up against this forest. Tell me about shooting that moment.
We got to reenact together on your show.
That's right.
Which was so fun. It was the brilliance of the way Peter worked, that there were so many different things that came together to make a moment like that work. So my memory of that particular moment is quite funny, and you know, it was sort of embarrassing because I was on the stage. There was no river. There was no ring rates, right? Yes, ring rates. I didn't have Elaija with me. I had, at that time, there was different versions. So there was a man named Kieran who was 3'6". He would sit sometimes, but I actually had in that particular scene a kind of a doll that was going like to kind of look real and move if it was in a mid shot. So I was trying to just keep a straight face, get my sword up without knocking myself with it, and say the Elvish, Nino Hithaiglier, that whole thing, and without bursting into hysterics, because I don't think I was on a horse. There was a robotic doll moving below me, and really it was just a few stones and a green screen, and then Peter just makes everything brilliant. Like there was a moment where Frodo's laying there and I come to him and we're crying, and it you know, we were literally in a little pile of rocks on the soundstage in a box factory with airplanes flying over it. And then when he cuts the whole thing together, it's magical. It's beautiful.
Kate, for me, everything around the Mirror of Galadriel is great. I know what it is you saw. That side eye look is both very Galadriel and very funny in a way at the same time, because there's been this amazing moment between Frodo and the Dark Lord in the presence of the eye, and then cool as a cucumber. I know what it is you saw. Like it's a very high status thing for her to be doing in that moment. Tell me about shooting that scene.
What I really loved about what Pete and Fran and Philippa unlocked from the books is Galadriel's dark side. You know, that you don't get to be that old without seeing a lot of stuff. And there wasn't a lot of scenes to bring that out, but they kind of wanted to play into that quite a lot, just how much she had seen, how much darkness she herself had been tested by. And so he was constantly playing with how much to reveal or to conceal, and it wasn't something that I'd immediately thought of when I thought of the story. So I found that really exciting. And then when we came back to do the Hobbit, obviously that was, you know, he wanted to look a bit further into that, even though she's not really in the books at all. Maybe a sentence and a half.
She's implied. She's implied.
Yeah. So and that's what I think that's why the films are so successful. They're not slavish to the stories. They're really personal for Peter, I think, you know, and so he was unapologetically looking at the stories through his own prism, and I think that's what, I mean, when you think about, like Liv was talking about how long they took to film, I think that's what sustained him and sustained everyone, is he was on a personal quest. It wasn't, of course, as a fan, but also he was just so fascinated by the layers, you know, in it. So.
And Viggo, for me, it's a moment for you. I'd like to know about it. It's when you're at the top of Amon Hen and you have found Frodo, and the two of you have that moment that in the books is really more of a Faramir moment. You let him go and then turn and fight the orcs. Like that moment of surrendering Frodo, passing Isildur's test, and then going to fight the orcs. I love the letting Frodo go, but my favorite moment is bringing the sword up in front of your face as you came to go fight the orcs. Tell me about the choreography of that moment. What was it like to shoot that?
Well, my memory, you know, you often, when you see a movie, it's like looking at a photo album, and what you look at that, and what you
given to me by Viggo.
No, you know, when you look at a photo album, you're looking at pictures. You're often 90% of what you're looking at is outside that picture. You're remembering the day and who else was there, and you know that person's dead now, whatever. But when I'm watching that sequence, for example, and I remember it was extremely hot. It was summer. It was so hot, and I felt so bad for the enemy, because they were wearing these rubber suits. Basically, they had so much prosthetics, and they were really gasping, and I mean they drank so much water. It was so hot. I remember. So I think we first shot the thing with Elaija, that was a very crucial moment for both characters. For Frodo to realize, okay, this guy's not trying to take this, and he's also saying, you know, go your way, do what you have to do. And that was beautifully shot. And then when we did this, I looked at Bob Anderson, the sword master. I said, how are we going to do this? We'd worked on this choreography, but then it was like there was a lot more of them. He said, well, they all look the same. It's like, how am I going to know which are the guys that we did the choreography with and who are the filler guys? It's like a wall of monsters, and it's 40 degrees out, you know, centigrade. It was like, oh my God. And so he said, you'll know that they'll come for you, and you must dodge the ones and the other ones. And Bob said, don't worry about it. Just whack the ones that aren't important. Just, you can really hit them. And I said, well, Bob, I don't want to do that. But he said, that's okay. They're ready for it. They're padded. And so it was mayhem. Once it started, and that was a gesture I wanted to do, that I was sort of taking it, some idea from Nordic sagas or something, but it was like this moment of quiet. It's like, okay, now all hell breaks loose.
Well, we've got to go in just a moment. Before we do, is there anything you stole from set? Is there anything that you kept with you? I know, Kate, you've got the ears. Anything else you took?
Well, I had a baby. That's how I know how long ago we did this, because when the premiere happened, while you were all there looking glamorous, I was pushing out my soon-to-be 20-year-old son. And the guys from Weta, you know, they knew how much I love the ears, so they bronzed them for me. But then Pete and Fran and Philippa gave me this beautiful little, it's almost like something out of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. The guys from Weta had made this beautiful zinc kind of pedal car that looked like an aeroplane. And it just, you know, and I love it. I've stuck all my kit, and there's got a little padded seat and buttons, and, you know, and this reminded me how they're just, A, they're incredible craftsmanship, B, they're extraordinary generosity, but also they're just like big kids. And they, you know, they're all of these amazing things they made, they just loved it. And I think, you know, so all of those things. And they also made all of my kids, they got their shoe sizes. Of course, they don't fit them anymore, and they made them all Hobbit feet.
Oh, that's fantastic. Liv, did you take anything? I mean, how about, do you have a souvenir? I mean, you're not thieves. Do you have a souvenir?
They made us all they made me a sword, I guess, like Viggo as well. You know, I think I need to, I'm sure I have more stuff up in my attic that I need to go.
The sword is great. The sword is is great shakes.
With some of the Weta people, like these guys have said, the talent of these craftsmen and women and was so phenomenal. I used to go visit on my days off and just walk around and talk to people and sit for them, and I'd never seen work like that before. The detail that went into every piece of leather, every prosthetic, every miniature, it was phenomenal. So I had a couple, like I had a ring made for my ex-husband, Royston, of Arwen's face that he cast. They're very, very talented and so special. So love to go back.
Vito, did you take anything from as a souvenir?
I did take one. I have this very nice, beautiful, dark, smooth stone that I took from the Greenstone River. And that's connected to the two towers, because that's where, you know, the horse comes and finds me, you know, I'm floating down the river. And after I've been thrown off this cliff and, you know, thought to be dead. And I almost drowned in that river. There was just an unexpected thing happened. It was fairly deep, and I was meant to float down into this eddy, and all of a sudden there was a current. I don't know what happened. I got sucked down to the bottom, and they couldn't find me for, a serious amount of time. And I was like, it was very clear. I remember seeing the sky. It was beautiful, but I was like, I can't. It was really cold too. So I was running out of air, and I was trying to get out of this. It was like this current was pushing me down. It was weird. And I had these leather clothes, so it was heavy, and I kept kicking, and I finally kicked against this rock and got out and popped up, and I was like, whoa, and then the stunt guys expected me to be somewhere else. And so it was a very close call. I mean, needless to say, didn't do that. Another take, they had the shot they needed. And I just wanted to remember that close call, and so I did take this nice little stone from there. So that's the one thing I stole from New Zealand.
And Orlando, what'd you take?
I had a bow that I used. I had a number 1 bow and a number 2 bow, and I think it was my number 1 bow. The shot before my last take in the whole thing, it broke. And this was a rubberish bow with metal inside, and I'd been using it the whole time. And I was in this fight sequence, and it snapped. It just bent in half, and it was not going to bend back because it was the metal inside broken, and I was devastated. They gave so my second bow was brought out, which I had used as a stunt bow and for plenty of moments and everything. And I was given that. Right at the end of filming. But funnily enough, I was really attached to all this stuff. I think that's probably as we all got kind of attached to stuff. And I remember, I think I wrote a series of emails many years later to Pete and Fran, who was so sweet. And I said, I would love my quiver because I got so attached to that quiver. And because I think they thought they'd given it to me. There was so much happening at the end of that period.
Yeah.
They were so generous with everything they were doing. And I think there was like wrapping up the movie, saying goodbye, farewell to people. There was so much happening. And I remember I received this package in the mail, and it was my quivers. And I was like, just my mind blew. I was just like, oh, wow. And they've got so now I have them they're in a very special place, being very well kind of presented. I sort of so.
Well, and I'll tell you the one thing that I have from it that Peter gave me years ago is I have one of the stings.
Oh, wow.
I have one of the 4 hero stings.
You've done really well out of this, Stephen. I
really
did.
I
You're killing the game there. You've got Aragorn's sword, you've got Sting. You could retire right there.
Well, that is a wrap on the second of our 3 conversations with the cast of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Thank you to Kate, Orlando, Liv, and Viggo. And thank you to everyone watching, hopefully live in theaters right now, all around the United States and around the world. And I want to thank everybody working at those theaters who are doing everything possible to give you a safe and comfortable experience. And I hope we can all be together again soon. And join me soon in this very same theater for The Return of the King with Andy Serkis, Ian McKellen, and Peter Jackson. Thank you all so much, not only for tonight, but obviously for what you gave us 20 years ago and everything since. Thanks again.
Anole.
Thank you.
Anole.
Bye.
Anole.
Hey, everybody, I'm Stephen Colbert. Welcome back. I'm sure you enjoyed The Return of the King. Let's welcome back our panel, Ian McKellen, Andy Serkis, and Peter Jackson. Hi, guys. Thanks so much for being here. I'm so happy to see all 3 of you again. I've had a chance to talk to you individually in the past, but never together. And I've got a few questions generally about the films for all of you and a few individual questions for each of you. The first one is 20 years on. This is the 20th anniversary of the release of the first film. It is recognized as a masterpiece, both a critical and commercial success. Changed what was expected, I think, of movies in terms of their ambition, their spectacle, the time they took to tell a story. We have all that perspective now. Going into it, what did you think you were getting into? Let's start with you, Peter. What did you think you were going to be making?
It's a good question because you have a sort of an image in your mind. I mean, we'd written the scripts, obviously, and so during the script writing process, you imagine the movie. I mean, as I do, you're writing the scenes and you imagine how they might be shot. But then once you have actors joining the team, they bring their own. They end up owning the characters. I mean, during the script writing process, the characters are all in our heads and we're imagining everybody's voices and everything. But once you have the cast joining the team, then you can let all that go and let the actors take control of their characters. And so that's when the surprises start to happen. And so it's the great thing is it's evolving. I mean, what was I imagining? Originally, I was imagining a fantasy movie of the type that I loved growing up, Jason and the Argonauts, Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. Not exactly like that, but that's the reason why I got the idea of doing these films, was that I loved those films when I was young. And I realized that fantasy is a genre at that time that hadn't really been done very well. And I just thought that if we could take these books and make them as great as The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, then we'd be doing something pretty good. That was what I hoped.
Did the ambition, because it's an enormously ambitious work in its final execution, did that ambition grow as you approached it, or did it diminish based upon what was possible and what's not? Professor Tolkien actually said in his foreword, the tale grew in the telling. Did the movie grow in the making?
Yeah, it certainly did, in the sense that in the literal sense that even while we were shooting the movie, Philippa and Fran, more so than me, I had a day job that I was busy doing directing, but there'd be new scenes written even while we were shooting. So we'd written the scripts, we'd cast the film, we'd designed it, we were started to shoot, the studio were on board, and yet we were still writing scenes. We didn't stop. That didn't mean that we were just, the script was frozen in time. We were constantly evolving it throughout the 3 or 4 years that we were shooting these three movies. So yeah, it did grow in the telling. I mean, the scene in the Two Towers, Andy's scene of the Gollum and Schmeagol talking, was a scene that never existed in the original script. I mean, that was written literally during the making of the film and shot by Fran. So a lot of we wrote on the fly. You write a script, you get the green light, but that you can't say the script's perfect. So you keep writing all the way through the shoot. So we were just writing on the fly the whole time. So certainly it grew, yeah.
Well, what about the actors? As Peter says, the actors make the characters their own, and they bring all the surprises. Ian, what did you think you were getting into when? how did it start? Like, how did Peter approach you to do this part?
By telephone, I think, and then I had to remember Peter to say I'd love to do it, but then I couldn't because I had to complete another movie. Everything was arranged.
You almost didn't get to do it, Ian, because our first meeting in London, when we came round to visit you in the house, Fran and I came down, we hammered on the door, nobody answered, hammered again, nobody answered. And we literally thought, well, this isn't going to happen. Ian's not at home like we thought he was.
Or he's hiding.
And we'd started to walk down the street to get a cab to go to our hotel, and the door opened, and you would, come back. Sorry, I was on the phone. And so that's how close it came to you not looking the role.
I'd forgotten that. Yeah. As I remember, you came to my house and sat in a room just above where I am now, and you weren't wearing any shoes. I thought, hi, this is all. I hadn't read Lord of the Rings, Stephen, can you believe it? And so it wasn't a great thrill to be asked to play Gandalf. It wasn't until I rapidly read the book and realized that it was the part of a lifetime. And when I got to New Zealand, Peter still wasn't wearing any shoes. It's the New Zealand way. But I had the impression I'd got involved in a home movie. I mean, everybody seemed to know everybody and be friends with each other. Not always the case on a movie set, I must say. And we were filming in an old paint factory, right back next to the international airport in Wellington. And do you remember, Peter, you had to have an assistant out in the all weathers on a walkie-talkie telling you that a plane was about to land or a plane was about to take off, and we shot in between the time schedule of the airlines.
Somebody sitting on a deck chair on top of the hill overlooking the airport, who would say, no, there's a plane approaching, it's going to land in about 3 minutes. We say, well, how long's this shot? Well, 3 minutes. We didn't just wait till it lands. And we every time we were ready to roll the camera, we had to check on what the planes were doing. Yeah.
But we did. Peter and I both kept a public diary separately about the shooting of the film. The internet had only just been invented, and we were rather pioneers, weren't we, in this sort of communication.
So you were blogging. You were blogging your days.
Blogging, exactly. And I realized then that my ignorance was not shared around the world. There were millions of people, some of whom contacted us and said, "What are you going to do? Are you going to make the movie exactly like the books, and they meant exactly like what they thought of the books. And I had to keep saying, no, it's Peter Jackson's movie, but you can trust him. But it was wonderful to know that so many people actually wanted the film to be made. That's not always the case when you're making a movie. You wonder, is anyone going to ever see it? So there's a certain sense of responsibility, but as an outsider coming into that, wonderful family about whom I'm still very fond and affectionate. We were just accepted and embraced, and then discovering this the wonderful country of New Zealand. I mean, in every aspect, it was like one long real holiday plus. Doing a bit of very, very, very pleasurable work.
Well, Andy, what about you? What was your first approach to this? How did Peter approach you about this, and what did you think you were getting into? Because, as unusual as any of these roles are, yours might be the most unusual.
Well, yeah, I mean that was the thing. When I was first, I first got the call from my agent saying, look, this film is happening down in New Zealand, Lord of the Rings, and they're looking for someone to do a voice for a digital character. Would you? And I was like, well, Lord of the Rings. Hold on a minute. Lord of the Rings must have loads of great characters in it. I don't want to do a voice for a digital character. Well, I can't see the joy in that at all. I'm not a voice actor. I'm an actor, and And so anyway, then it was explained that it was Gollum. Then it was just like, oh my god, Gollum. Well, that's a great role. I mean, I've read The Hobbit again, like Ian. I hadn't actually read Lord of the Rings,
Wait, so did you say you hadn't read The Lord of the Rings, but you had read The Hobbit?
No, I'd read The Hobbit, and I loved The Hobbit as a kid. I was massively into The Hobbit when I was a kid, but I hadn't actually read Lord of the Rings. And then I met people. Well, and then I auditioned, which was kind of going in, and I did a sort of version of Gollum, a kind of rough version of that, which was, as I've said probably many times in interviews, that based on my cat coughing up fur balls. That's absolutely true. And then I met. And then I met Peter and Fran, and Pete, then explained sort of the real nature of what he was after, which was to have an actor on set be the character, and although finally it would be manifested as as a CG character, because you could never really cast someone that emaciated and to look like the way that Pete wanted and Fran wanted it to look. So that was kind of, once that was explained, that the acting process, and then it just grew. I mean, look, I arrived in New Zealand. I was one of the last to arrive, in a way, and I'd been working on the character, and then my first scene was seen sort of somewhere up in the 600s, kind of, as classic filmmaking. You turn up, and it was in the third movie, climbing up towards Mordor and attacking Sam and Frodo as they're about to, the end of the movie, basically. And I just remember crawling around on some rocks and in a leotard, and Pete just laughing, really, and just laughing at me and kind of giggling away and wondering what the hell I was doing. And I suppose, Pete, at some point, you just thought that it was worth filming, because it was.
Well, I mean, it's certainly true that we, in our minds, because motion capture back then hadn't, I mean, it had been invented, and we didn't invent it, but performance capture, but it wasn't really, used. It was, and our visual effects company was young and figuring how to do things anyway. And so we thought that Andy would do the voice of an animated character. Then we realized that having Andy on set, just performing the character, would be a great guide for the animators, and also for the other cast on set, so they'd have somebody to look at rather than looking at a tennis ball on a stick like Ian had too many times. Sean and Elайджа would get to look at Andy, and then we sort of came to the whole concept of motion capture slowly sort of seeped into the process, but only after we started filming. I mean, we were shooting Andy in a flesh-colored leotard as a lighting reference, because we thought when we replaced Andy with the animated character, the flesh-colored leotard would give us the reference for the light direction.
So did you have to go reshoot those scenes with the proper motion capture suit on, with like reference points and everything?
Eventually we did, but we didn't even think we'd be doing that. We thought they'd be animated at the very beginning. Animators would copy what Andy was doing on set in his flesh-colored leotard and just animate them. But then during the course of the filming, we explored the idea of motion capture, which was new to us, as a visual effects company. And we figured out that and we did experiments and tests, and Andy was involved in all that stuff, really pioneering the idea of being able to perform as a motion capture character. And then that did result in us having to redo all of Andy's scenes during post-production. He had to come back to New Zealand or stay in New Zealand. Everyone else had gone home, and he had to recreate what he'd done a year earlier on location, and this time just in a studio with a motion capture suit. But and later on, towards the end, we also did some motion capture on set, didn't we, Andy? I mean, we did a lot more of that, obviously, in The Hobbit, but for Lord of the Rings, we just dipped our toes into that towards the end.
Oh, and that flesh-colored leotard, Andy. Oh. I'll tell you, if you've got a spare photograph, I promise you, I'll put it on the
actually
wall.
have it.
I know.
Nothing and everything to the imagination at the same
I know
time.
that Ian was forever wanting to borrow it for the weekends, and we said no, the dry cleaning bill would just be too expensive.
So let's talk about the characters themselves. How important is a backstory to a character who is immortal, has always been here, will always be here, and happens to presently be caught in the body of an old man? How much backstory can you bring to a Gandalf?
I don't think you can play that. What you can play is what he appears to be, and he appears to be a bit of a tramp, doesn't he? A man of the road, independent, meddling, vivacious, gregarious, but very human. What he is inside, or what he has been in the past, I really didn't think about it. It was just moment to moment, and I love the fact that this eccentric but real human being was actually immortal and over 7,000 years old. But you can't play that. You say, well, I can't imagine. I did remember asking Peter about the hat one day, because I was very bothered that the little pack that they gave Gandalf to carry would have had all everything he needed in life in it. His pajamas. I suppose he slept in pajamas. Did he? God, when did he wash? When did he obviously didn't shave, but he must have cleaned his teeth. And I suggested to Peter that actually everything that Gandalf needed was kept inside his hat, and it was a magic hat.
That's right.
And his dinner was in there, his breakfast was in there, his mail, everything, but that didn't come about. So no, I just went for the reality of the guy, and based the voice on Tolkien's own voice. There's a recording, I've not heard it for a long time now, of Tolkien actually reading a little bit of Lord of the Rings.
That's interesting, because when I was 13, I've been an obsessive fan for a long time. I got is it Caedmon, is that how you say it, or the Caedmon recording of Tolkien? He's almost unintelligible to my ears when he's just talking as himself. It's very Oxford Don, like it's very Humphrey.
Yes, he is, but and a pipe smoker, of course. So he's probably talking through a pipe like that. His teeth are probably full, but yeah. And he's obviously a great talker, and doesn't like the sound of his own voice, but he likes communicating. And obviously, Gandalf is such a person as well. It's difficult to imagine Gandalf ever on his own, really, isn't it? He's always with people, and he's the guy in the corner of the pub who you want to go and sit next to and reminisce and hear his stories. That's the sort of tone of voice that I got from Tolkien, and of course quite middle class or upper class even. You're posh, we'd say in UK, and an academic, of course. I've got him here actually. Here we are. There's Gandalf. But of course, I was lucky because I played two Gandalfs. They get on very well with each other. No, boys. No.
Well, Andy, what about approaching Smeagol Gollum? Smeagol and Gollum, if you'll see from my bookshelf. Smeagol here, Gollum there. How do you first approach a character who has such a bifurcation?
Well, you know, I was lucky in the fact that I was able to play my backstory. I mean, I actually got to enact the whole journey, really, from being affected by the ring, as you know, Smeagol becoming Gollum, and that was an amazing few days. And again, that was something that evolved during the shoot, because originally I wasn't slated to play the younger version of Smeagol before he became Gollum, and then that sort of evolved, and so I actually had a chance to, and that was an amazing few days, kind of getting that transformation right. But the other thing was, it was based on, I wanted to find something that was very tangible and real and felt kind of emotionally truthful, and the notion of addiction, really, I suppose, was what was, you know, the addiction to the ring, the power of the ring, that other thing that holds you in, you know, in its control, has control over you. And so once I found that the physical kind of wretchedness of the character and the physicality and all of that just sort of came from a notion of being controlled by this other very powerful force, like an addiction. So yeah, and then it was just a matter of sort of going from that very early version of the voice, sort of expanding it, and then working with Pete and Fran and Philippa, and you know, as Pete was saying earlier, you know, the scene that where you see both very clearly the both sides of the personality. We really experimented during the filming of that, and I found those two voices, and yeah, it's just, but it was, again, going back to what Pete was saying, the whole thing felt very, very organic. I mean, I do remember spending a long time before shooting, crawling around on all fours, trying to find, and like going for long walks on all fours and being stopped by people going, "You're mad, you're bonkers."
Was this in Wellington? Was this in Wellington?
This was in Wellington. This was actually in Breaker Bay in Wellington. Yeah. Going for long walks by myself on all fours, but you know, anyway.
What does people? Why would that seem strange? I don't know.
Oh,
yeah. and Andy, I remember, you know, how we talked about that the Smeagol and Gollum, you know, scene in the camp that was directed by Fran. I remember another scene that had a similar origin, that we decided that we should show the moment, and this was all made up while we were shooting, or you know, this was concocted while we were shooting, as we should show the moment where Smeagol murders his cousin Deagle in the boat, you know, where they're fishing in the boat, and you get to sort of play him as a store, or as a sort of a more.
That's right.
Human, and I remember on that was going to be directed by Fran as well, because she'd done so well with the other scene, except she woke up that morning with a migraine. I was shooting something else, so we had a second unit to do the scene with Andy, and Fran just said, "I can't direct this. I've got this terrible migraine." So Andy and a crew had already arrived on location. They were about 30 or 40 miles away, and I had to call Andy and say, "Look, your director isn't going to show up. Could you direct the scene for us?" And so Andy got to direct that scene because Fran couldn't make it with her migraine. So that was how sort of organic everything was. It was kind of fun, you know. And he did a great job.
For each of you, what was your favorite day to shoot? In other words, for favorite scene to shoot, and what's your favorite shoot? What's your favorite scene that you're in, both of the actors? Then I'll get to Pete. Ian, favorite day to shoot or favorite moment in the movie?
Oh, the first day. It's not often you're on a movie and the first scene that you shoot is your actual first scene. So it's Gandalf sitting in the cart with Elaiджа and driving into Hobbiton with a pony and trap. You know the picture. I mean, I think it's a famous John Howe painting, isn't it? Or was it Alan Lee, Peter? John Howe. And you reproduce that. And there were all these flowers and vegetables which had been planted a year before, so they were in bloom in time to be shot. And arriving, makes you quite tearful, really. There you are, you're in Hobbiton. You really are there, and there are the round doors leading into the holes that eventually you will enter, not in situ, but in the studio later. But that was the first day. The only trouble was it's a bit windy, and the pony was getting a move on, and there was a bit of a breeze going, and it caught the hat, and we couldn't keep the pointy hat on. Eventually, a bit of elastic was brought to play, but no, that was my favorite scene. Also favorite because I didn't have to say anything. That's the best thing in a movie, when you just have to be. You're just there, and you look around at Hobbit and think, well, is there anywhere else I'd rather be now? No.
How about you, Andy?
Oh gosh, I think one of my favourite days is actually down on the South Island filming the What's Tater's precious scene with Elaijar and Sean, and having to eat a rabbit that had been eat a rabbit that had rubber inside it, so I could kind of pull against it, and then and then I remember I had a line and I ended up spitting at the end of the line, and I remember thinking, so spit is the only part of me that is actually in this movie. that little bit of spit I was very proud of, and the animators kept it in and built kind of the facial expressions around my spit.
We have a couple of questions from people from Twitter. One of them is, if Gollum was essentially a hobbit, how come he doesn't know what a potato is?
Well, they don't. He's a store hobbit, and river folk don't really have much to do with potatoes. They're fish people.
Peter,
potatoes must have been a very Hobbiton thing.
I think so.
They weren't, by the Anduin River, didn't obviously know what potatoes were. I think it's
that in pipeweed, I suppose. Will you ever release the Faramir and Eowyn wedding footage? And does it exist? I didn't know about it until this question came in.
Is that a question for me? Did
yes.
we shoot? We did. Oh my God! Did we shoot a wedding scene? Well, I think we might have done. I'm only just remembering it now, so I can't say whether it'll ever be released. I mean, sure, if and it will exist. I mean, the trouble with the Lord of the Rings and these sorts of scenes that we shot is that we shot 7 million feet of film on 35mm negative. And at the end of the production, it was all in New Zealand is where we were shooting. We were storing it here. At the end of the production, we had to hand it over to Warner's, because it's their film. It belongs to them. It was shipped to America, and Warner Brothers apparently, I've been told, have got a vault somewhere in the Midwest and inside some mountain somewhere. And so the 7 million feet of film where that wedding scene would be sitting in perfect condition is in the middle of a mountain in the Midwest. And so just the process of convincing Warner's it's just the sheer logistics of us getting our hands on the footage and doing it is tricky. And we've talked about it with Warner's a couple of times. We'd love to scan it all now and scan it all at high resolution, the original footage. And
Stephen, could I ask Peter a question?
Of course.
And so is there ever going to be a Lord of the Rings or Middle Earth experience that people can go and visit? I don't just mean to go to Hobbiton, which I know exists there, and I know New Zealand is there, and that's a Middle Earth of sorts. But is there ever going to be a place where you can go and spend the day and go and visit all the locations reproduced?
Even like a theme parky thing, like the Harry Potter.
Theme park, yeah.
They're over the years, and it's been 20 years now, once or twice there's been conversations about Warner Brothers possibly building a park here and a park there, and they might want a Middle Earth section of the park, but it's never come to anything. So I wouldn't say never, because Warner's have obviously mentioned it to us a couple of times. So it maybe it will one day. I don't. It's really up to Warner's, because not only do they have to do the Middle Earth experience, I think they have to build the park somewhere. The entire park has to be built that would accommodate it, and so that's really whether that ever happens.
Well, Peter, I know things that you have from the set. You've taken me to your storage rooms where you've got like the bigatures and things like that, and I've seen bits of Gondor that you've got built places. But I'm wondering about the actors. Did you take anything from the set? Is there a particular prop or anything that you've kept with you? And a memento from the time.
Well, let me. Hold on.
A little Durin's gold, a little bit of Smaug's treasure.
And I believe you got a couple of these, have you, Steve?
I do, Melon. I do.
That's where that one went. I was wondering where that coin went.
Look here, what I've got these. These are my favourite things.
Oh right, yeah.
You see, a little knife and a big knife, a big fork and a little fork. So if you're playing Gandalf, you have the little fork, so you look big, and if you're playing a Hobbit, you have the big fork, so that little.
Oh,
So
there you go.
I have some cutlery too. This is one. If I've got this right, Peter, this is one of the 4 hero stings from the Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
And I eventually had to pry it away from my boys because they were using it to fight with the Anduril I got from Viggo back there. I said, "Give me that! Give me that damn thing! It's worth more than this house."
Yeah.
So,
Well, I've got a couple of things to show you. First of all, this guy who Pete and Fran very kindly gave to me one of the sculpts, the early sculpts. Actually, this was an early version,
wow.
which I have. But it just means that we can talk to each other, can't we, precious? Yes, we can. You know, so I can do that to myself. You know.
What's interesting with that, Andy, because we as Andy was performing, you know, on set, as we talked about, you know, the visual effects crew and team were designing Gollum. So ultimately, you know, that's who we'd be seeing in the film. And that thing, that bust that Andy's holding there, that's an early Gollum, because what we decided to do, rather sensibly, it was sort of obvious really, but it took us a while to figure it out, is to make Gollum's face more like Andy Serkis, because Andy's expressions that he was doing, in order for Gollum to capture those expressions, he had to have a face that looks a lot more like Andy's than what was on that bust. And so we redesigned Gollum's face to actually be a sort of a caricature of Andy. That was that all happened, you know, as things were you know, the evolving process of figuring it all out. So that's a pre-Andy Serkis bust. That's one that hadn't been Andy-fied.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. This is such a pleasure for me, and I know for everybody out there watching this, hopefully live in the theater right now. But that's a wrap on the last of our 3 conversations with the cast and creator of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Thanks to Andy, Ian, and Peter tonight. Thank you to everyone watching from theaters around the world and everyone working at those theaters who are doing everything possible to give you a safe and comfortable experience. I hope we can all be together again soon. Gentlemen, Ian, Andy, Peter, thanks so much. What a pleasure.
Thank you, Steve. Great to see you.
Stephen. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen.
Fantastic.
Stay safe.